It was worth waiting. So, welcome everybody. Thank you very much for your patience and for joining us today. My name is George Wilson, and I'm Head of English Programs at the British Council in France. The British Council is the organisation for cultural relations and educational opportunities between the UK and France. And a big part of our work is supporting English language teaching and learning in France and around the world. Griselda, could you just move to the next slide for me? So just before we begin this exciting webinar, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about our work. We work very hard on research to help people understand and look into the complexities of language teaching. We create events that help people exchange and share ideas. We offer advice to those who ask us for it. We have lots of resources that can help you and lots of training available, of which this is part. So Griselda, the next slide, please. So most of our training is delivered through our Teaching English community. And you can see on the screen the link. This community brings together millions of teachers around the world and over 100,000 in France. But it's not the only type of training we do. Today, we're very lucky to be joined by Griselda Beacon, who will be working with you over the next hour on the first in our series of CLIL primary webinars. These webinars have been developed in partnership with Norwich Institute for Language Education and with the support and guidance provided by the academies of Dijon and Grenoble. They're a unique opportunity to really share ideas from the UK and France and to look in detail at some key questions that have come up during my visits around France, from talking to teachers and teacher educators. These webinars will be taking place every Tuesday in November, and you have the same link to join them at the same time each Tuesday. The first one is about to begin, and we're very lucky to have Griselda Beacon with us. Griselda is a teacher educator based in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and she's an expert in teaching young learners, teaching CLIL, and in creativity in the English language classroom. She's been working in the field of teacher education and primary curriculum development for over 25 years. And she's been sharing that experience in various international contexts. At present, she's a consultant trainer at NIL, the Norwich Institute for Language Education in the UK, where she runs the Creativity with Young Learners Summers course. Before we hand over, just a quick reminder that you can talk to each other in the chat, but please do ask your questions to us directly through the Q&A function. There'll be some time for questions at the end, and we'll also, of course, give you the link to claim your certificate towards the end. So thank you very much, and I'll hand over to Griselda.
Thank you. Thank you very much, George, for this nice presentation. Thank you, British Council France, for inviting me to be part of these webinars. Thank you, NIL, Norwich Institute for Language Education, for the same reason. And I would very much like to thank my critical friend in France. Her name is Réjeanne Moulton. She's a conseillère académique in the Academy of Dijon. She has helped me to more or less understand French schools, and so as to prepare a webinar which can be of help. So when I started with this webinar, I had these objectives. I wanted to explore the world of CLIL in English primary classrooms, mainly how to include school subject topics in our English language classrooms, and as well to develop learners' thinking skills. And so I thought I would like to share practical tips, insights, resources, mainly CLIL activities that are playful, that are cognitively demanding, and that are collaborative. So how do we scaffold learning in CLIL? Well, we use the support of graphic organizers. So I thought we need to integrate graphic organizers in our language classes, and drama activities to foster oral production. And within all of this, to offer a variety of teaching materials. So that was my intention when I started with let's talk about CLIL in primary, right? So even though I know that many of you have already been working with CLIL in the last couple of years, I thought we need to somehow have some clear concepts that we all share so we know what we are talking about. So what are the main tenets of CLIL methodology that I would like to revise? Well, mainly these. When we talk about CLIL, we talk about active learning. And in this case, for children, it has a lot to do with learning by doing, exploring, discovering, hands-on activities. Now, when we talk about active learning, it is not only the kinesthetic, but it's also the mental activity, right? Because it has to do with developing thinking skills. And how can we integrate tasks which interweave content and language learning? For oral production, well, we use lots of role plays, dramatizations, and games because they make learning meaningful, engaging, and it offers lots of opportunities for recycling vocabulary and content knowledge. And when we think of CLIL, we all go to the 4Cs framework, which was created by Do Coyle, and she mainly works with 4 pillars, the 4 pillars of CLIL. One is content knowledge that we take from any of the school subjects. Another one is cognition, that is developing thinking skills. A very important one is culture, how anchored that our teaching is to culture. And in this case, we can nowadays talk about community. How is it anchored in our community, in where we are teaching? And what opportunities we create for communication. So we will bear these 4 pillars in mind when we work with the activities I have designed for today's webinar. Now, one important aspect in CLIL is scaffolding, and that is how we help learners to be able to produce either in writing or in oral contexts. And so there's lots we can do as teachers to provide this kind of support that they need. Now, for that reason, I thought how to work today. And the idea is to work with a teaching unit, which is small animals in the garden. Why? Because this unit, by grouping everything around this topic, it gives me the possibility to show you the interrelationship of the activities and how important it is to bear the content in mind when you decide on the activities you're going to carry out in the classroom. Now, all of these activities, you will see that they are very much adaptable. Once you learn more or less how they work, you can adapt them to different contexts, different grades, and you will see that it becomes easy. Now, the second thing is I thought of a target group. In this case is learners who are 9, 10 years old. But again, the activities can be adapted to younger learners and also to older learners, right? So having that in mind, one of the first things we do whenever we plan a teaching sequence or a unit, we have anticipated learning outcomes. That is what we would like the learners will be able to do at the end of the teaching unit. So in this case, what I would like it to be is that the learners will have explored the surroundings to find and discover the small animals which live in their gardens and their parks, and they have learned to value their contribution to the environment. Remember that sustainable education is transversal to whatever we do in education at school. So it would be ideal is our learners will be able to draw, name, describe small animals to their classmates, and they have played card games and drama games to recycle the new knowledge and to add new information about small animals. They will have carried out maths games and combined maths with natural science and English language learning. They have participated in surveys and other interactive activities in collaborative contexts. They have listened to and performed classical stories like fables and carried out creative tasks and wrapped everything up and developed artistic and aesthetic awareness. So it's a very, I have high hopes for this, for the learning outcomes for this unit. Now, I'm not going to work on this table right now. I just want to show it, but we're going to go back to it at the end when we have gone through all the tasks that we're going to show today, right? So I will use this again at the end, but what I would like to pay attention to is that everything that you will see today was inspired by Bloom's taxonomy model. So, and they have to do mainly with what cognitive tasks I create and how they can also, you know, work with communication. So Bloom, very simply summarized here, works with what tasks we carry out for our learners to develop different thinking skills like remembering, understanding, applying the new content, analyzing the new content, evaluating, and creating. And he divides them into lower thinking skills and higher thinking skills. The lower thinking skills are the remembering, the understanding, and the applying, while the higher order thinking skills is when they can analyze, compare, contrast, categorize, evaluate, and create, right? So all of these need to be part of our CLIL units. Now, let's begin with our teaching sequence. Let's see how we start. We will see that the activities get more and more complicated as long as we continue, right? The first activity is a very simple activity. It is just to ask them to work in pairs and together make a list of the small animals they can find in the garden. So they just write their names and maybe they draw them. And we need to provide some support. Remember the scaffolding. And the support we can provide is posters on the classroom walls with all these small animals and their names in English. So they can go through the classroom and have a look and write down the animals they know, right? Or they like as well. Now, you can also provide extra support like picture dictionaries or encyclopedia or some internet sites that they can see or you know, find out information. Once they have the list, what ideally, what I would like to do is to have our first outdoor activity. So if the school premises have some small garden, you could go out and so they can explore and see whether they can find those little animals in their context. And maybe they find others. Maybe they didn't write ant on the list, but they go out and they find a little ant or several ants, you know, and so they can write them down. So when they come back to the classroom, what like the end of this first activity could be to draw their own small animals poster. And they can do it in pairs in an A4 worksheet. Now, that poster, which will be hanging on the walls of the classroom, will be used later on in other activities. So it's important that they keep it. Now, I would like to ask you a question now, which could be the second poll question, please. And I would like to ask you whether you do carry out outdoor activities. Okay, now we are waiting for your answers. Thank you very much, all of you, for being here. And let's see, so far, you do not carry the on rare occasions is the most popular one so far. Okay, so, well, I know it's difficult in some places to design and to carry out outdoor activities. In CLIL methodology, yeah, on rare occasions is the one that has the highest percentage, whereas regularly comes second and almost never comes third. So thank you for your comments. So going back to the question, outdoor activities are activities which allow learners to be much more autonomous in their learning, and they can explore the context surrounding them. They can use all of their senses, and it's an opportunity to learn outside the classroom. So I highly recommend them, at least every now and again, to have small outdoor activities. In case that you could not be able to do this activity here, you could give it as a homework task. So when the learners go back home, they could, on the way home, they could see whether they find other small animals, or at home, if they have a garden or if they have a balcony, perhaps they can find some of these small animals, right? So this would be our first activity. We started remember Bloom's taxonomy, remembering vocabulary, learning new vocabulary, creating the poster. So we are drawing and writing at the same time to recycle as well the vocabulary. So the next proposal is to play card games. Playing is necessary as part of primary. Playing is a mode of learning, and playing cards becomes a very active learning activity. Now, the first card game is a memory game. And here we are working at word level, right? And it's simple. They have to match the picture and the word, right? And this can be a whole group activity, right? Everybody can be playing at the same time. But then you can design another card game describing small animals. Here, the teacher will provide cards, and they will have, for example, the picture of one small animal with only one characteristic at the back. So one kid gets the card of the butterfly, and it says the butterflies are colorful. Then another kid gets another card with a butterfly, which says butterfly have wings, etc., like 4 characteristics for each animal. So the kids have to go around the class and find other learners who have the same animal. So they come together, and then they read all the descriptions, and in so doing, together they create a small animal profile. And then they need to read these characteristics out loud for the rest of the class. So now they are reading, they are looking for somebody with the same animal, and they are creating small paragraphs, right? This is when we move into more sentence level. And the third activity is similar, but it becomes a listening activity. In this case, the teacher provides, the teacher has all the cards, and the group is divided into 3 or 4 groups, and each one of them has a bell. So the teacher reads the characteristics out loud, and the different groups need to guess what animal it is. When a group knows, they ring a bell. And so they say the animal. Now, if the animal is correct, they get a point. But if the risk was not correct, they may get 1 point less. So you can play with that. And again, now they are not reading what they have already read, they are listening only. And they are all, games that they are playing together as a group. Now, the next card game is a classical CLIL activity. And you give them all the cards with all the pictures of the small animals, without the characteristics now, only the pictures. And what they need to do is, in small groups, they try to group the different small animals following their own criteria. And the teacher always provides an example. For example, ladybirds and ants, what do they have in common? Well, that they have 6 legs. So the categorization was because of the number of legs. So then they do that, and you will be surprised to see what kinds of groupings they do, right? And it can be because of color, it can be because of ability, it can be because of some physical characteristic that these small animals have. And in this way, what we are doing is they are categorizing, and that is a higher order thinking skill. So if we are thinking about Bloom's taxonomy, right? And they are working collaboratively because they're always working in small groups. And they are developing autonomy as well, right? And so in this way, we have provided opportunities for both content knowledge and language to be interwoven. So once we have done all the card games, these card games at the same time can be used at any time when you have these 5 minutes before the end of the class and you need to think of an activity that is very quick. So you can always have these games as support in case you need that, right? Or sometimes learners finish early, so some groups, so you can give them one of these games to play while the others are finishing their tasks. The next activity involves, it's connected with, remember the 4 pillars of the 4 Cs? It has to do with the community. And so now we are leaving the classroom and we are joining the whole school. And for that, we carry out a survey. What's your favorite small animal? And ideally, the kids prepare a form, a survey form with all the small animals and the squares for the names of the people to say what animal is their favorite. And they carry their small animals poster that they have created to give the respondents some support. So they are scaffolding the respondents' answers, right? So in this case, they go around the school, they ask teachers, they ask other learners, they ask other school staff, what is your favorite small animal? And they complete the task. When they come back to the classroom, we are going to use all that information they collected, because it has to make sense, right? Otherwise, why would we have gone to outside that classroom walls if we would not use that information? And so what we would do is, in class, we would go through a rank ordering game. And for this, we're going to provide some sentence frames to help them organize the information. For example, 2 out of 10 like spiders. 5 out of 15 prefer butterflies. So in this case, each of the learners, the groups, complete their survey. But then when each one of them have their own information about their own survey, we can have a rank ordering game with all of the surveys and see which is the most liked small animal in the school or the least likable, right? So that would come out of this rank ordering game. And we as teachers can decide whether we do only one or both of them. In that way, we have also included the community in our learning of the small animals. Now comes a bit more complicated activity. I call it running dictation, and it goes like this. Let me show you. We teachers prepare small paragraphs with information about each of the small animals we are working with. And we stick those small paragraphs with the information all over the classroom walls. We divide the class into small groups, and each group will receive paper cups with the one small animal on it, like this, or like this, right? Or like this, like the bee in this case, right? Now, you see that in the picture, right? And they also get lots of paper slips. Why? Because the idea is that they need to find the information about the butterfly and put it inside the paper cup. So when they find the descriptive paragraph about the butterfly, they go, in this case, it's the bee. So they go and they read the information, and they choose small piece of the whole to remember, because they need to come back and they need to complete the information on the slip of paper and put it inside the cup. So they need at least to collect 4 or 5 pieces of information about the bee to put in the small cup. So they are using kinesthetic learning, because they are going, reading, remembering, coming back, writing, put it inside the paper cup, and going like this. When the activity is over, each group will present their small animal with their main characteristics to the group. But it is not over. We are going to keep that information to do the next activity. And the next activity is an infograph. So for that, before I move on to the infograph one, I would like to ask you one poll question about graphic organizers. So Paul, if we can, George, if we can ask our third poll question, please. What graphic organizers do you generally use in class? Graphic organizers are tables, Venn diagrams, infographics, spider maps. Let's see what you say. Well, tables, everybody seems to be using tables, so that's great. Yes, tables are very useful, right? Well, so there are some who are using all of them. Spider maps, okay. Not very many are using Venn diagrams. All right. Okay, so tables, wonderful. Well, this 70% of all the teachers are using tables, great. And then spider maps, a smaller percentage, And very few of you use Venn diagrams. All right, so that's thank you for this. Now, let's see what I had in mind. Now, here we have a clear, this is an infograph. So remember that the learners had all the paper, all these small pieces of paper inside their cups, right? So in this case, they will complete an infograph. The teacher may provide an infograph template to be done in the classroom. And so what they do is they write the information they collected about their small animal, in this case, it's the bees, to create this fact file, right? So for example, in this case, it's when it's about the bees, they transport pollen from flower to flower, they produce honey, they fertilize a variety of plants and trees, and then maintain biodiversity. When they are doing this, we are working with sustainable education, which was one of my anticipated learning outcomes, remember? And as we know, it's transversal. It's a sustainable education is transversal to everything we do at school. Now, of course, that this activity, this infograph could be also done digitally, of course. And ideally, you hang all the work that the learners do on the classroom walls, right? Because they need to see their work being shown, right? Now, very few of you use Venn diagrams. Well, let me show you one Venn diagram that you could use when to move on to higher order thinking skills. And this one is a Venn diagram in which learners compare different small animals. And this one is spiders and ladybirds. For this, the teacher gives, you divide them in pairs, so they are working in pairs. The previous two activities were in small groups. Now this one is in pairs. You give each one of them a Venn diagram template, which is the one that is there, which says spiders and ladybirds, and you give them the small paper cup, which says spiders and ladybirds, with all the information that they are going to use. So you see how they manipulate objects. And that is a fantastic strategy for them to learn without being aware, because when the body is very, very active, they are learning, they are learning a lot. So what they do is they pick up the little pieces of paper, they read them, they must be either for ladybirds or spiders or for both, and they put the pieces of paper on either one or the other side. So I have one question here. Is it a ladybird or is it a spider? They have, I'm reading it to you. They have a black head with white patches on either side. Now, let me see if you can write on the chat whether this is a ladybird or a spider. They have a black head with white patches on either side. All right, okay, so Celine says ladybird. All right, okay, now let me see if I have, now, if we have a look at the ladybird, the ladybird is the one who has a black head with two white patches. So very good, Celine, you were right. Yes, the ladybird, says Alice. Oh, thank you. Oh, lots of people say spider. we need to check, right? Now, this would be a nice activity for us to check whether spiders also have two white patches. So this is the good thing about this movable Venn diagram is when they finish and they have completed the activity in pairs, and you as teacher have been, walking around checking that everybody's working, the kids put all the little pieces of paper again inside the paper cup, and they pass it on to another group and they get another one. So you can also decide whether you go through the whole circle, or whether you want that each group works with one or two, depending on the time you have, right? So finally, not finally, because then comes the whole creative part, but regarding Venn diagrams and graphic organizing and scaffolding, the next one is another game. Now, this time, the game is the following. Learners will use, one learner will wear a headband and something like this. Yeah, it's there on the slide. And the learner doesn't know what animal he or she or they are, right? So what they need to do is they need to ask questions. So the group, yes, no questions. So the group can tell what animal, yes or no, and they can guess what animal it is. So in this case, the main language part is asking questions, asking yes, no questions, right? We are working with that. Now, most probably learners will need scaffolding for this, for all these questions. So what you prepare is a bank of questions. So you use just a simple paper cup with lots of questions inside, and we can call it a bank of questions. We can prepare the bank of questions with the learners before we actually start playing. So we have lots and lots of questions we can resort to ask when we are playing, right? Like, for example, can I fly? Yes, you can. Have I got 6 legs? If they say no, then we have limited the scope of animals, of small animals, right? We have to think animals who have 8 legs, or who have no legs, or who have 14 legs, or 100 legs, etc. But not 6, for example. And in that way, we can, the game develops, right? So in this way, we have given learners lots and lots of possibilities to manipulate information, to recycle knowledge, content knowledge, and language, right? And vocabulary, questions, etc. Lots of reading opportunities, writing opportunities, listening opportunities, and interactions with their classmates. Now, I would like now to add some creative, a creative twist to this, or even more creative twist to this teaching sequence. So now I thought not so much of factual information, but more stories. So the first one is a reading task. And for that, I might come with my friend here. I don't know if you can see my friend. I don't know if you can see my friend. I would come with this for learners to ask me, what is it? And then I would say, oh, it's a centipede, it's John. So I would introduce the story with the centipede. And I would say that I have this story, which I adapted from one by Tony Ross. And it's about a centipede, John, who was cold in the winter, and he bought 100 socks to be warm. But then he took a lot of time to put on all the socks and to put off all the socks, so he decided to give them all away. So he opened a garage sale, and lots of small animals came to get them. So you provide a sentence frame for the learners to be able to do this, because what they have to do is keep the record of what animals got what socks until they reach the 100. So you provide an example on the board which says 1 worm, for example, 2 socks, 1 head plus 1 body. So 1 sock for the head and 1 sock for the body. Then, for example, a family of 6 spiders. So the spiders have 6 legs, so it's 6 multiplied by 8 legs, so it's 48 socks. And then a couple of ants. So we have 2 ants multiplied by 6 legs, it's 12. So in total, we have so far 62 socks. So they need to prepare the record with all the animals they decide in pairs, and they will do the mathematical equations, and they will do the drawings, and they will show it to the class and see what animals got what socks, right? So this would be an activity which involves a lot of cross-curricular topics, right? Because we are using maths and natural science and English learning at the same time. So now that we're working with creativity in particular, I would like to ask you our 4th poll question, which is exactly referring to creative tasks. Let's see whether you use arts and crafts, whether you use drama activities, whether you use storytelling, whether you use other. Well, now this is working. Okay, lots of you use arts and crafts. Great. Lots of you use storytelling. Wonderful. And drama activities as well. And some of you have other ideas. Wonderful. So arts and crafts is the main one. 73% uses arts and crafts. Lots of you drama activities, 36%, and 56% storytelling. This is wonderful news. Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you. So now I would like to say something about this. This could be a reading text you give the learners, but before giving the reading text for the learners, what you could do is, as I did with you in a way, while I was using my John Centipede friend, is doing storytelling, telling the story before you read it, right? So that would be a way to work with it. Now, this story lends itself for a dramatization, inevitably. So we can prepare the drama activity, which is the following. We need socks. So ideally, you can ask learners to bring socks from home. So you have a mountain of socks to work, to play in the classroom. And if it would not be possible to bring the socks to the classroom, you can always resort to drawing socks with the kids and decorating them and using paper socks, right? So that is a second possibility. But ideally, ask them to bring the socks from home, because they will find it funny and they can manipulate the socks and they can choose the socks they like most, etc. And then you create several stations in the classroom where they dramatize the garage sale. And in this case, you need a centipede who's going to be the one who gives the socks away, and you will and the small animals, they will be. And you provide a small language support that you can write and leave it on the board so they can see, which somehow summarizes the interaction. Like, how many socks would you like? Oh, I'm a spider. I have 8 legs. I need 8 socks, please. Oh, here you are. Thank you. And that could be the kind of activity that they can carry out. They can, of course, think of some elements they can wear to become spiders, to become ladybirds, to become the worm, or to become the centipede, right? That they can create, like, using the elements they have in the classroom. So this could be a wonderful way to finish off with the reading of the centipede story. The last one, and this would be my last activity of the teaching sequence, is a fable. And well, before going into the fable, this activity, the one I have just presented, obviously works with the pillar of the 4 C's of CLIL, which is communication, right? We are providing context for them to use language meaningfully and creatively, right? And they can use this language support, and they can adapt it, change it, add some words of their own, etc., etc. So this is only a help, but it can be transformed in many different ways. Now, the last activity is storytelling and performance, which is I use the fable by Aesop as the one, the grasshopper and the ant, which I adapted. And there are many versions of this fable. I adapted it to the 21st century. And as the fables are, they have animated animals, and they always teach a moral. And in this case, it's the grasshopper who would not take care of collecting food for the winter, and then when the winter comes, has nothing to eat, basically. And the ant is very hardworking, and the ant has a lot of food. So at the very end, the grasshopper is very cold and hungry, and so here is the twist, yes, for the 21st century. So the grasshopper says, asks the ant, "Can I have some of your food, please?" And the ant says, "Yes, well, but you call me a silly ant." And so the grasshopper says, "Oh, I am sorry." And so the ant says, "Okay, and we can share." And so the grasshopper learns a very hard lesson, but the grasshopper and the ant can share food together. And for that, you can bring the story with cards, right? And you can give them the cards, and you can say, before you actually tell the story, you can say that that they could put it in order. So imagine that they can follow the story by what they see. You can work with them first with what they see, the animals they see, what they are doing, what are they carrying, where they are, and then they put them in order. Then you read the story, and they check whether the order they chose is the correct one, or whether they have to do some alterations. Then, once they have done that, you give them the text, but you give them the text divided into different cards, which match each of the different pictures. So what they need to do is match the text and the pictures. And finally, when that is done, you're going to read it again, and then you stop and you say, now in groups, in pairs, you create freeze frames. So they need to be, freeze frames are drama activity, is a drama activity in which they are in the position of the animals according to what happens in the picture. So when the grasshopper sings, they can be like, oh, singing, or when the grasshopper relaxes, they can be relaxing, or when the ant carries the leaf, they can be, like working hard, etc. So the freeze frames are really very useful activities that you can do, which shows understanding. Finally, you give them the complete script, and you say that they can practice that in groups of 3, and then they perform. And one of them will be the voice in off, the one which reads, "It's a lovely summer day," right? And then one will be the grasshopper, and one will be the ant. So this is the last activity for the whole teaching sequence. So now I think that I can show you, I can show you the table and see whether the skills I had in mind, which were all cognitive skills plus communicative and creative, respond to the interrelationship of activities. So, and how this has a lot to do with the anticipated learning outcomes. So the remembering and the finding out, exploring and discovering was something that took place when we made the list, when we did the outdoor activity and we made the poster. The recycling vocabulary and reconstructing short descriptive paragraphs plus categorizing information connected with the card games. The participation in collaborative activities with the community through the surveys. Then the opportunities for reading and writing and using graphic organizers to present new information with the running dictation and the fact files and Venn diagrams. And finally, the reading and calculating, the role plays, the listening to stories and performing with cross-curricular activities, drama activities, and storytelling. So this is how the interrelationship of activities connects with the skills that were necessary to be able to achieve my anticipated learning outcomes. So to round up, this is the CLIL lesson planning I have in my 4 steps. First, the first thing we always do is we try to activate the learner's interest in what we are going to work with. Then we work with knowledge, with the subject content and with cognitive tasks and we add creativity, cultural input, communicative activities. When we finish off, there's a moment for us teachers, which is for me very, very relevant, which is the teacher reflection moment. This is when you go through everything you did in your teaching sequence and you reflect upon it to improve, to see whether you need to change some things or not. So this teacher reflection helps me move on to the post-webinar task. Because when you click there for the post-webinar task, you will see that the first task is to go through the teaching unit that I prepared. I added to the post-webinar task the whole planning of the teaching unit, divided into 7 different lessons for you to choose one, to see whether you can create links with what you do in your teaching context, to compare, to contrast, to do something of it, and lots of reflection activities to improve your teaching in your classrooms. So thank you very much for having listened to my proposal, and I am open to answering your questions, and I hope it is of use for your work.
Thank you so much, Griselda. That was fascinating, and lots of really interesting comments in the chat, lots of interesting questions. Before we answer a couple of your questions, let's just talk a little about the certificate, shall we? Can you flip over to the next slide? So we know a certificate is important for some of you who are here within your training programs. So we'd encourage everyone to complete the feedback form using the link on the screen, the link that's going to go in the chat as well, and you can scan the QR code. If you submit the form at the very end, once you've submitted it, you'll get a link to download a certificate of attendance. And you can do this up until the 8th of December. So we'll pop that link in the chat and we'll send it round in the follow-up email as well. So just, there were 2 really big groups of questions, I'd say. The first one is related to, well, let me express it here. How would you lead the same topic, but with children who don't yet read English?
Yeah,
now,
that's a good question. Now, as I said, all of these activities are very adaptable. So for example, I was thinking the drama activity when they're young, very young. Well, you can ask them to be the animals. So, for example, let's be spiders. So we all have to walk like spiders, for example, around the classroom. Or let's be ladybirds or be butterflies. And so they can, they can all play in the classroom with the animals they are supposed to represent. Or you can also do this in a more, first you do that, everybody is a butterfly, everybody is a spider, but then you add some complexity. Then you give them cards with the drawings so they know what animal they will perform, but the others don't know. So they are going to be different animals. And when they meet, they say, hello, good morning, I'm a spider. Oh, good morning, I'm a butterfly. And so they are using, very short sentences in English while they are performing, and they are using their own bodies to play in English and with natural science. So this is something that that they can do. So you adapt the material all the time, as well with the words they need to write when they're very little, and the only thing that they can do is write the names of the animals and nothing else. Well, then you give them the drawings, and the names of the animals are all scattered around the classroom, and they can go and check and then come and write. They can just write one word and nothing else. Or you can ask them, for example, to create, and this is something that first formers do a lot, to create picture dictionaries for example, small animals. So they draw the picture and they write the word, and you can even go further and do it bilingual. So they have the butterfly, the French word, and the English word. So they have a bilingual picture dictionary that they create in the classroom.
Lovely, thank you.
I hope
And
that helped.
it does answer the question. There's a similar question. When writing the names of the small animals, can the students use their own language?
Absolutely. Well, this is a perfect question. I've been thinking about that all the time because I didn't know whether to say it or not to say it at the very beginning because it could take the whole webinar. Of course, they can write the words in French first because sometimes they don't know the name in English, but they like the animal. So it's a great thing if they write the name of the small animal in French, because then they need to go and look for it in English and they are learning a new word. And so it's a whole new universe, right? And besides, in CLIL, we always use language one as resource. So it is absolute, and it's what will happen when you do this. Yes, that many of the small animals they know it in French. That's why the idea of the bilingual dictionary is also part of that as well. And also giving importance to their own language, their own mother tongue, right?
Yeah, and we've got a webinar just on that very topic, actually, in the series. One last question. How do you ensure before the students do the running dictation that they master the structures, the vocabulary well enough, and they're not discouraged by the unknown words and structures?
Actually, as they are not going to produce anything on their own, because everything is in the text. So that it's not that they're going to produce anything new. The text is very transparent in terms of the information that it gives. It's factual information, especially with languages like French, for example, which is, in that case, the words are very transparent, so they can understand the text, even though they may not know all the words in English, which is a fantastic thing, because you give them a more complex text that they would know, but they can understand all the same because of the transparency and because they know the information from their French classes. So it's information they already know as well. And so they can resort to that knowledge to understand this, and they only copy small, and the phrases are all very simple. they're not complex sentences, like they transport, you know, pollen, they produce honey. So it's extremely simple. So they are working with something that is a little bit more complex, but they can do it because they do not have to produce anything new.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. You've done a great job of showing how a CLIL lesson can be rich in oral production and speaking. So we're really, really grateful to you for all your expertise. And we're really grateful to everyone who's been participating so actively in the chat and asking such interesting questions. Thank you. We really hope you'll join us next week for the next in our series of webinars. Obviously, you'll be receiving a reminder nearer the time. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a lovely evening. Thank you, Griselda.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for being here.